I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. The White House announces the names on President Trump's Gaza Board of Peace. Ukrainian negotiators head to the US for security guarantees talks. And Trump threatens new tariffs on countries opposed to the Greenland takeover. The White House has unveiled a new international body to oversee Gaza's temporary governance as President Donald Trump moves his US-backed peace plan into its second phase.
The White House says the United States has named members of a board of peace to oversee Gaza's temporary governance under President Donald Trump's plan. Officials say the move launches phase 2 of a 20-point roadmap focused on stabilization, reconstruction and longer-term governance following a fragile ceasefire. The plan also establishes a Palestinian technocratic body, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, to manage day-to-day governance and restore public services. President Trump will chair the Board of Peace. The founding executive board includes US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, US Envoy Steve Witkoff, Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, Apollo Global Management's Mark Rowan, World Bank President Ajay Banga and US advisor Robert Gabriel. The White House says former UN Middle East envoy Nikolay Mladenov will serve as High Representative for Gaza, coordinating on the ground with the Palestinian Committee. An international stabilization force will be deployed to support security and demilitarization efforts, led by US Major General Jasper Jeffers. A separate Gaza executive board is also being formed, including representatives from the United States, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates and the United Nations, with additional members to be announced. In Gaza, reactions to the announcement have been mixed, with Palestinians expressing both concern and hope as a ceasefire continues.
We hope that the peace board created by US President Donald Trump will work very seriously on the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip and opening all the border crossings.
The peace board will be an introduction to a long-term hegemony that would cancel the unity of the Palestinian people and the geographical locations between the West Bank and Gaza.
The most important thing is to open the border crossing, and when the plan continues, to help the people, because we are in a miserable situation in the country, a catastrophic situation.
The White House says the international board will oversee Gaza's governance during a transitional period as humanitarian conditions remain severe.
US President Donald Trump on Friday offered to mediate the long-running Nile River water dispute between Egypt and Ethiopia. He made the offer in a letter to Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Trump said the United States is ready to help ensure fair water sharing while allowing Ethiopia to generate electricity from its $5 billion Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The dispute centres on Ethiopia's Blue Nile Dam, which Egypt says could cut its water supply, while Ethiopia sees it as vital growth and doubling electricity production. Ukraine says senior officials are heading to Washington for key talks with the United States as Kyiv seeks progress on security guarantees amid renewed Russian threats and a worsening energy crisis.
Ukraine says senior officials are travelling to the United States for talks on security guarantees and a post-war recovery framework. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv is seeking clarity on next steps and Russia's response to US-backed diplomatic efforts.
We hope that there will be more clarity regarding the documents that we have already prepared with the American side, as well as Russia's response to all the diplomatic work that has taken place and is still ongoing.
Zelensky says Ukraine has completed its part of the work, with a possible signing expected in Davos if the documents are approved.
If everything is finalized, if there is acceptance from the American side, because from our side, in principle, I believe that we are finished, and then it will be possible to sign during Davos.
He also warned that Ukraine faces growing security risks, as intelligence points to new large-scale Russian attacks, while air defense supplies remain insufficient. At the same time, Ukraine is facing its most severe energy crisis since the start of the war, following repeated Russian strikes and extreme winter conditions. Electricity remains limited, with supplies prioritized for essential services.
There was no such difficult situation in Kyiv since the beginning of the war. The last attack was very significant and painful for our city because half of the houses, high-rise buildings in our city, which is about 6,000, were disconnected from the heat supply when it is -20 outside at night. At the moment, there are about 100 buildings without heating. That is, almost all 6,000 buildings have heating now.
Ukraine has declared an energy emergency. Energy Minister Denis Shmyhal says all power plants in the country have been damaged by Russian strikes. He says Russia carried out 612 targeted attacks on Ukraine's energy grid in 2025, knocking out thousands of megawatts of capacity.
The annual World Economic Forum opens in Davos next week as world leaders gather to discuss key political and economic challenges. Organisers say the event will feature the largest ever US delegation led by President Donald Trump.
Business and political leaders will gather in Davos next week for the World Economic Forum's annual meeting as the global rules-based economic order faces growing pressure. The 56th edition of the forum, running from January 19th to 23rd, is being held under the theme A Spirit of Dialogue. Forum leaders say dialogue is essential at a time of rising geopolitical tensions and economic uncertainty. US President Donald Trump is expected to attend, leading the largest American delegation in Davos history. It will include senior cabinet members, Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and a bipartisan group from Congress. World Economic Forum President Borge Brende said dialogue is not a luxury but a necessity, though critics argue the forum risks losing relevance as major powers pursue national interests. More than 3,000 delegates from over 130 countries are expected, including 64 heads of state and government, with key discussions focusing on global trade, geopolitics, and artificial intelligence. Organisers say the meeting aims to help leaders find common ground and shape cooperation for the future.
The European Union and Mercosur signs historic agreements in Asunción, Paraguay, ending 25 years of negotiations. European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen attended the ceremony. The deal creates one of the world's largest free trade zones, covering more than 700 million people. EU officials say the agreement will boost trade and strategic autonomy, with final ratification still required from the European Parliament and EU member states. Greek rice farmers are warning the new EU trade deal could threaten their livelihoods. The agreement would allow more duty-free rice into Europe, adding pressure to growers already hit by rising costs and drought. The country says the deal will boost exports and includes protections for farmers, but Greek farmers disagree.
Rice farmers in Greece have voiced concern over the new EU-Mercosur agreement, fearing it could threaten their livelihoods. The deal will allow Europe to import 60,000 tons of duty-free rice from South American rice over 5 years. Greece, Europe's third-largest rice producer, exports most of its 240,000-ton annual crop to Europe and Turkey. Farmers say rising production costs and recent droughts have already made life difficult and have blockaded roads over delayed EU aid.
The prices at which we used to cultivate no longer exist. A year ago, we were selling rice at 50 cents. Today it is 25, without products from Mercosur having even arrived yet, without tariffs, because some products were coming in, but there were duties. Today, if those also arrive without tariffs, we cannot even think about cultivating.
We will not manage to survive. At this moment, as we speak, many colleagues have already abandoned their fields. Whether they are theirs or rented, they have left their machinery and have sought other jobs in the private sector.
However, Greece says the deal will help sell products like feta cheese and mastic, while also protecting farmers against sudden import spikes.
The European Union has signed its long-awaited free trade agreement with the South American bloc Mercosur more than 25 years after negotiations first began. The signing took place in Asunción with leaders from Argentina and Uruguay attending, alongside representatives of the European Commission after EU member states gave their final approval earlier this month. Now let's bring in our guest, Gregory Matthew, political analyst from Stockholm, Sweden. Gregory, thanks for joining us on the program.
Good evening, it's always a pleasure.
Now, this deal has been stalled for decades. What changed politically and economically to finally push it across the line now?
Indeed, it took quite a long time to sign the deal. 25 years of negotiation means that there were certainly a lot of concern on both sides of the partners to have a complete agreement. What it will change is that it opens a new market for European products, but it also opened the European market for their products. And normally it should be in the benefit for the consumers, for the end users of these products. But as everybody knows and experience show, that it may also be a problem for certain part of the economy on both sides, and namely in the European side, the farmers are very concerned about that agreement.
Okay, so both sides essentially stand to benefit to some degree, but who's likely to feel the pressure here alongside farmers in the EU, as you just pointed out?
Well, it's difficult to say, time will say, but there are a lot of benefits of such agreements. Namely, Europeans will have access to more raw materials, and they will not be dependent of China only in things like lithium or rare earth. There are quite a number of such resources in Argentina and Brazil, so this will benefit for the industry and the economy in Europe. Definitely, the Germans are quite happy with this agreement because it will allow them to sell their cars more in that continent, in that part of the South American continent. But when I said farmers, even not all farmers are unhappy. It's mainly the meat producer. We just heard about the rice producer in Greece, but some part of that industry are happy. The wine producers, they are quite happy with that deal. The cheese producer, they are not unhappy about that deal. So the market will regulate everything, and we will see with time who are the beneficial. I think it's in the advantage of the South American side mostly.
Mostly, and several EU countries raised objections, particularly over agriculture and environmental standards, as you partly pointed out. Are those concerns resolved, or have they been overridden for now?
I think they are not resolved, and this is where the problem is. I think the farmers are telling that when they have to produce crops, they have to comply with so many rules, so many regulations. They cannot use this product, that product. They cannot use that water, or they have really a lot of regulation that is established in Brussels. When their competitors in South America have less rules, they can produce cheaper, and therefore the product becomes cheaper. But the end user, the consumer, when you go to supermarket, well, you will always have a choice. You can buy made in France, made in Greece, but obviously it is always a little bit more expensive to buy European products. The same will apply with chicken, for example. And the quality and the level of producer, they can use products and production methods in Latin America that are completely forbidden in Europe. And this is where the farmers are fearing a disconnection, and it's unfair competition in their eyes, and I would tend to agree with them.
Okay. Gregory, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your insight.
You're welcome.
Now, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is set to raise the issue of the return of Syrian nationals during talks with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara in Berlin next Tuesday. A government spokesperson said Germany is seeking to deepen relations and make a fresh start with Syria's new leadership. Officials say several key issues will be discussed, including the voluntary return of Syrians to their home country.
We're here today to work with you.
International tensions are rising over Greenland after President Donald Trump suggested the United States could use tariffs to pressure countries into supporting his claim to the Arctic island. European allies warn the move could deepen divisions within NATO.
US President Donald Trump has warned he may impose tariffs on countries that refuse to back his plan for the United States to control Greenland, further straining ties with European allies. Speaking at a White House healthcare event, Trump said Greenland was vital to US national security and suggested trade penalties could be used as leverage without naming specific countries.
And I may do that for Greenland too. I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security.
Greenland, a self-governing territory of Denmark, has repeatedly rejected any idea of being sold or transferred to the United States. Denmark has also firmly opposed Trump's claims, warning that any military action would undermine NATO unity. Trump argues Greenland's strategic Arctic location and mineral resources make it critical for missile defense and for monitoring Russian and Chinese activity. The US already operates a military base on the island. Amid rising tensions, a bipartisan US congressional delegation visited Denmark and Greenland to show support and lower the temperature. Senator Chris Coons said the group aimed to listen to local leaders and relay their views to Washington.
Listen respectfully.
Several European NATO members, including France, Germany and the UK, have also sent small military teams to Greenland to participate in joint exercises with Denmark. Russia, meanwhile, said Greenland remains Danish territory and described the situation as extraordinary under international law. Despite growing international opposition, Trump has not ruled out further steps, saying talks with NATO over Greenland are continuing.
Bulgaria is heading for another snap election after President Rumen Radev confirmed no party was able to form a government. The Alliance for Rights and Freedoms returned the final exploratory mandate unfulfilled, the third refusal this week. With Parliament unable to produce a stable majority, Radev said he will appoint a caretaker cabinet and call early elections, the 8th in Bulgaria in the past 4 years.
Връчвам ви този мандат и като символ на националното единство.
Portugal is facing an uncertain outcome in this Sunday's presidential vote, with no clear favourite emerging among the top candidates. Recent polls show a tight race and suggest the contest is likely to go to a runoff for the first time in 40 years.
Portuguese voters will head to the polling stations on Sunday, knowing the presidential election will likely end up in a rare runoff, the first in 40 years. It comes as political fragmentation leaves the race wide open. A recent poll shows far-right candidate André Ventura, leader of the opposition party Chega, slightly ahead with 24% of voting intentions. He's closely followed by socialist Antonio José Seguro on 23%, while João Coutrim de Figueiredo of the Liberal Initiative is close behind within the poll's 2.2% margin of error. Two other candidates, including Social Democratic Party-backed Luis Marques Mendes, each have 14%, keeping the contest among the top 5 extremely close. Smaller polls in recent days have shown similar tight margins, highlighting the uncertainty of the outcome.
The days ahead will be really challenging.
The result is unexpected. What is certainly expected is that we will have to go to a second round.
The Portuguese presidency, while largely ceremonial, carries important powers, including the ability to dissolve parliament and call snap elections. Despite Ventura's lead, his rejection rate of more than 60% suggests he would lose in a runoff against any of the other top contenders, leaving the final result uncertain.
Now we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. US President Donald Trump on Friday thanked Iran's leadership and said he greatly respected their reported decision to cancel more than 800 scheduled hangings of protesters. Trump has strongly supported the demonstrations, which began on the 28th of December over economic hardship and currency collapse, though local media reported some clerics still called for executions. He also said he alone decided against military action in response to the protests.
You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings.
While Russia continues its full-scale war in Ukraine, a major sanctions evasion network is helping it acquire critical Western technology. An exclusive A-News investigative documentary, Shadow Trade, reveals how Armenia has become a central hub in the scheme.
Despite sweeping Western sanctions, Russia's military machine continues to receive a flood of vital foreign components. Exclusive A-News investigation reveals a key route through Armenia. Data shows Armenian exports to Russia exploded from $880 million before the war to nearly $3 billion now. The spike is in specific critical categories: phones, computers, machinery and microchips, exactly what Russia needs for its weapons.
A lot of countries cannot export directly to Russia because of sanctions. So imagine the trucks that have a lot of electronics, a lot of phones come to Armenia. Some trucks from Russia, some trucks from other countries. And the goods from other countries on the spot are hauled from one truck to the other on the spot. And those go to Russia. And the paperwork is such that those products were produced in Armenia. But this is the case. So this is, in fact, re-exports. So the paperwork says that those products were produced in Armenia, so to circumvent the sanctions.
Experts say Armenia's small economy could never absorb or produce such a volume, confirming it's a transit point.
Seeing that kind of data, seeing that evolution of demand in those countries, that evolution of their trade with the European Union, we can say for sure that not the story about the development of their economies and their industries, that's the story about the re-export of goods via their territories to the Russian Federation.
Ukrainian forensic teams dismantle Russian missiles and drones daily, finding them full of these Western microchips. They confirm the components are essential for Russia's attacks.
So in general, we have identified about 600 components, different components in different types of weapons. I'm sure that if these chips will not provide it to Russia, they will not be able to use missiles and drones.
In return, Armenia receives billions in sanctioned Russian gold.
According to the Armenian Customs Service, the country sharply increased its gold imports. In 2023 and in the first half of 2024, it reached $4.4 billion, about 66 tons. And there are companies which are backed by Armenian oligarchs and politicians who are part of this entire scheme, which also raises legitimate questions whether the Armenian government is aware or somehow protects this entire business.
To move this volume, investigators track the operation to Yerevan's Zvartnots airport, where cargo traffic doubled. The gold is then re-exported to markets like the UAE, creating a secret financial channel for Moscow. While Armenia's Prime Minister speaks of European aspirations, the investigation finds the country deeply enmeshed in Russia's sanction-busting network, a network with deadly consequences on the Ukrainian front.
Azerbaijan and UN Habitat have signed a logistics agreement to advance preparations for the 13th World Urban Forum, which Baku will host in May 2026. The deal, signed by UN Habitat Executive Director Anna Claudia Rosbach and Azerbaijani official Anar Guliev, moves planning into an operational phase and builds on the host country agreement signed in 2023. The forum will focus on safe and resilient cities and for the first time will include a leaders' summit, bringing together global decision makers in Baku. So preparations are well and truly underway in Azerbaijan to host the 13th session of the World Urban Forum after Baku signed a key logistics agreement for the event. The forum will also feature its first ever Leaders Summit, positioning Baku at the centre of global discussions on sustainable urban development, governance and future cities. Let's bring in our guests, Parvana Valieva, member of the Milli Majlis in Baku, Azerbaijan. Parvana, welcome to the programme.
Good evening, thank you for having me.
Now, the World Urban Forum is one of the UN's leading platforms on cities. What does hosting the WUF 13 say about Azerbaijan's ambitions on the global stage?
Thank you very much. Yes, Azerbaijan, Baku will become again a global center for global sustainability dialogue. We saw it, we successfully hosted COP29 in 2024. This was again climate resilient cities, and it also highlights Azerbaijan's growing role in the world and our dedication to sustainable development. Here, the problem in our problem statement, why it is very important, why these forums gather together different countries, because more than half of the world's population now lives in the cities, and this tendency continues to grow. Every 6 out of 10 people live in the cities, and so it is a wake-up call for the world. How cities should develop in the future. Another part of the problem is a global housing crisis. Today, nearly 3 billion people around the world live in inadequate housing conditions, and another 1.1 billion people reside in informal settlements and temporary shelters. And 300 million people are completely homeless. All these circumstances create significant health challenges, safety and economic challenges for the people. Housing is a fundamental human right. It's very important to highlight this. Surely we all deserve to live in a city, not just for surviving, but thriving. We can't achieve the defined targets alone. That's why multilateralism emerged here. Everyone has a role, and everyone can play a role in sustainable urban development. We need new ways of thinking, we need new ways of acting, new ways of working together. And in this spotlight, World Urban Forum, which is the United Nations' largest global platform on sustainable urban development, brings together governments, city mayors, experts, private sector, NGOs, youth, to discuss how cities can develop in the future and address global housing crisis collectively.
Okay.
These forums highlight,
Parvana, I want to move on to the logistics agreement that's been signed by Azerbaijan. But beyond organisation, what kind of influence or soft power can hosting an event like this deliver?
So Azerbaijan was selected to host WUF 13 because we play an active role recently on global sustainability dialogue. We also strengthen our commitments in climate resilient cities and urban planning. We have good relationship, cooperation with UN Habitat. Azerbaijan, for example, was elected to the UN Habitat Executive Board for the first time for the next 4 years. In addition, we hold a co-chair role in UN Habitat's intergovernmental working group on adequate housing for all. And all these roles further strengthen Azerbaijan's role in negotiations and decision-making role in the global urban development. WUF 13 will be conducted, will be organized in Azerbaijan under the theme of housing the broad, safe and resilient cities and communities. We conduct this event together with UN Habitat. We focus on also logistic issues. It will be organized in Baku Olympic Stadium between 22 May this year, and our forum is focuses on the world's most critical issues, ensuring inclusive, safe cities, and also affordable, sustainable housing for all. For the first time in the WUF's history, we will conduct, as part of the program, Leaders Summit. It means that heads of states and governments from various UN member states will come to Baku to discuss global housing challenges, as well as exchange their views on sustainability, urban resilience. It means that Azerbaijan raised this issue in a higher level in dialogue. As well as Azerbaijan is a reliable platform also for highlighting the challenges of global south. It's again these forums, when we see the list of participants of previous WUFs, the main participants are from the African continent. That's why it means that we will host a lot of participants, international participants from the global south countries, and I think Azerbaijan, Baku is a very successful, was very successful during our chairmanship to non-alignment movement, as well as during our presidency to COP29, being a bridge between global north and global south.
Parvana, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Kazakhstan is adjusting its oil export routes amid ongoing disruptions to the Caspian Pipeline Consortium. The changes follow a series of attacks and operational restrictions that have raised concerns over supply security and budgetary risks. Our correspondent reports.
Kazakhstan is redirecting its oil exports amid ongoing restrictions on the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, the key route that carries up to 80% of the country's crude exports. In late December, around 300,000 tons of oil were redirected via alternative routes through the Castrans oil system. Supplies were sent to Germany, China, along the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan corridor, and through the Russian ports of Novorossiysk and Ust-Luga. Kazakhstan's national oil company says these measures will continue into January 2026 as long as restrictions remain in place. At the same time, Kazakhstan is increasing deliveries to Europe. In 2025, exports to Germany reached 2.1 million tons, while with the volumes expected to rise to 2.5 million tons next year. Oil shipments to China remain stable, totaling 1.1 million tons last year. Tensions escalated after an attack on the Caspian Pipeline Consortium on November 29th last year. Kazakhstan's foreign ministry described the incident as an act of aggression and lodged an official protest. In mid-December, the energy minister confirmed the losses of 480,000 tons, but said the annual production and export targets would still be met. In January this year, the situation worsened. Drones targeted two tankers preparing to load Kazakh oil, causing damage while the vessels were awaiting loading. And according to experts, continued attacks along this route could lead to significant financial losses for the state budget. They argue that the current situation calls not for temporary measures or emergency fixes, but for a systematic long-term diversification strategy. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
That's the world news from us this hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.